episode 115 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Fox News panics, crazy conspiracies, and blatant lies.
Dozens of furry surfers and their humans hit the beach in Spain over the weekend for the annual European Dog Surfing Championship.
Nice.
A chocolate lab named Koa was crowned the champion, while many other pups had the times of their lives, shredding some waves in beautiful weather. Thank God Krisit Noem was there because they were having the time of their lives, too.
I admit openly that clip has nothing to do with the rest of the podcast, but I wanted to use it because, hello, I'm Judge Jeanine, and I'm yelling at Krisit Noem for killing a puppy. What kind of a person shoots a puppy? A monster! You know, if she had a giant pen, just an enormous pen, like a pen like 10 feet long, I could just see Judge Jeanine just whipping it at Krisit Noem. And Krisit Noem, with like all of her freaky plastic surgery, would just be like, "Rah!" Hit her in the face, knock her over. Then a dog would run up to her and be like, "You, we hate you." Anyway, okay, I'm a little loopy. Now, you might already know that I just published the bonus episode. I'm going backwards this week. Normally, I try to do the weekly, then do a bonus, but because the bonus was based on the Trump Bronx rally, I wanted to get that out first because I thought it was, that just happened. Let's get that out first. And I couldn't stop researching it. So I did a deep dive pretty much on as many people as I could find that appeared on camera who were presented as just, hey, we just found this guy in the Bronx, when almost all of them were advocates or some type of politician or some type of media personality, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you should be transparent with your audience. So last week, Fox hosts seemed a bit panicked at the impending verdict in Trump's criminal hush money trial. Multiple people on the network made bold declarations that were patently false or came up with wacky conspiracy theories. It seemed like a distraction, really. Although the network continues to bash Biden with full gusto, there's also an underlining current of dread that seeped into the usual run-for-your-lives fear-mongering. It almost appears that it's beginning to dawn on some of the folks at Fox that pinning their hopes on a man who alienates half the country and who lost the Senate, House, and presidency in 1 year was a bad idea. Anyone watching a lot of Fox News last week might have also missed out on stories about abortion medication, an alarming hurricane season forecast, an alleged quid pro quo deal Trump attempted to make with big oil companies in exchange for campaign donations. I think that's just starting that story. Completely bonkers if that's true. Probably another crime. We could do another trial. It'll be great. So the shows I covered last week were Fox and Friends, the first hour, plus I got all 4 hours on Saturday. The 5, Jesse Watters Primetime, Special Report with Bret Baier, The Ingraham Angle, and Hannity. Now, those last 3, Special Report, Ingraham Angle, and Hannity, I just picked up on Thursday. That was the night of the rally. I will openly admit this is a very Rachel Campos Duffy heavy episode, but I don't normally cover her. And because I picked up these extra hours on Saturday, which I kind of had to, if you listen to the other podcast, you'll understand why. I just sat back and was like, she just gives me the clips, doesn't she? She just gives me the clips. This woman, she just thinks of something and it just comes right out of her mouth. There's no hesitation. It's not like, maybe I shouldn't say that. She just barrels through. And there seems to be a lacking in the thought process, which we'll discuss, of like, you really need to sit down and look at this big picture. But she doesn't. So anyway, she got her start being on MTV. Here we go. Rachel Campos Duffy thinks Vivek Ramaswamy would make a great vice president pick. This is from Saturday.
Yeah, the name not on there that I was expecting to see was Vivek Ramaswamy. And I know you and I have talked about this before, Will, but I think that Vivek actually, you talk about you said Tim Scott, this polling showed him like helping Trump like by 6 points or something like that. I think Vivek could really help with young voters. I think he's super articulate. I think he sort of bridges that gap between Donald Trump, who's, you know, in his 70s, and these millennial voters. And we're seeing young people starting to move in that direction, but not on that list. I
think the problem with Vivek is he also has a certain kind of unappeal, like more so than the others. The people that aren't necessarily in favor of Vivek say he came across arrogant in the debates and stuff like that. So
really?
I think that you have to hedge your bets.
Arrogant doesn't seem to have disqualified Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, if you have two people that are arrogant on a ticket, then what are are you appealing to that other set of conservative voters?
So, I mean, it should be obvious why Vivek Ramaswamy would be the absolute worst person for Trump to pick. Now, number one, he has no experience whatsoever. Zero. Never been elected anywhere, never worked in government, zero experience. Number two, completely wacky ideas, absolutely insane ideas this man has. But most importantly, there's somebody named Nikki Haley. And during the primaries, Nikki Haley basically battled Vivek Ramaswamy like crazy. I don't know why, but the two people who are of Indian descent were fighting like just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Mostly, it was Vivek Ramaswamy attacking Nikki Haley. That's how I remember it. That's what it seemed like. She was critical of him. That's kind of part of the gig. But he would just go straight for her throat over and over and over again. And I didn't really get that strategy. I don't think it served him. I don't think it hurt her, because I think a lot of people just did not take him seriously as a candidate. And if you're going to try to lure young voters, okay, but you're talking about the demographic that's the least likely to vote. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do outreach to young voters or shouldn't care, but it's an odd strategy to pick somebody young thinking you'll get young voters. Because, well, you're not going to get a lot of young voters, because a lot of people did not like Vivek Ramaswamy. He had very high disapproval ratings. People don't like him. They do find him arrogant. They do find him obnoxious. And so when you get somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy on a ticket and you're going, well, I'm going to get all these young voters, look up the number of how many young voters actually vote. It's not high. And I'm not attacking Gen Z. Gen X was the same way. It's just something about young people. They don't vote as in high numbers. As you get older, you realize like it really does matter. Like if I lose my health insurance, which I get through the ACA, I have no idea what I'm going to do, because I cannot begin to afford it without the ACA. I can't even fathom, because I remember what I used to pay before the ACA existed and how horrible my options were. Now, I also want to give another shout out. I did this in the last podcast to the account on X, formerly known as Twitter. I just call it Twitter. Bad Fox Graphics, who informed me that Rachel Campos Duffy has done this before with Vivek. No matter, who talks to her, she's still like holding out hope. Vivek Ramaswamy, the craziest one in some ways, is going to be the VP pick. I'm like, good luck with that. Now, I said this yesterday, and I think it's true. Rachel Campos Duffy has never met a conspiracy theory that she didn't instantly believe and then promote. During the Wagner Rebellion in Russia, she immediately declared that the CIA might be involved. She had no evidence. I remember that moment. I had picked up Saturday, the day that happened, because it sort of happened on a Friday night, American time. It was like a Friday night into Saturday. And I thought, well, I'll just pick up Saturday to see how they keep covering this, because that was exciting. It was an exciting 24 hours. And like the first thing she said was, I think we did it. And I'm like, hey, do you have any evidence to back up? No, of course not. You don't need evidence. You've got a gut feeling. You just know it. So why would you ever need to look anything up or figure something out? She also famously said that Michelle Obama would be the 2024 Democratic presidential nominee, like repeatedly. And I remember, because again, I don't normally watch her. I see her sometimes on the 5, or when I occasionally pick up a Saturday, or when she's subbing for someone. And I remember like when she would talk about the Michelle Obama one too, she'd be like, mark my words, I think Michelle Obama is going to be the presidential nominee. I think it. Write it down. I think it. And I'm like, what? The woman has said she never wants to run for any office. So, she's just going to say it, though. Campos Duffy doesn't care. So on Saturday, this one went completely viral for me, surprisingly viral, because I'm kind of used to her nuttiness, but I forget, like, the rest of the world is like, oh, what the hell did she just say? And I'm like, Rachel Campos Duffy, everybody. Rachel Campos Duffy. This is about, there's been a spike in immigrants from China who are illegally crossing our southern border.
Well, we had Michael Pillsbury on last weekend, and I asked him directly because President Trump had said, he's like, there's a very strong possibility that the Chinese increase, which is about 8,000% increase, military-age men coming over the border. Donald Trump has alluded to perhaps they're, sort of forming cells and like an army inside of our borders. We know that some of the terrorists are probably forming cells, but it's just, military-age men Chinese here. And I asked Michael Pillsbury if he thought that was a possibility, and he said yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nutty. Now, she didn't say, she did sort of say cells, but she did say army. She did say army. And I just kind of go, now first, Michael Pillsbury's not here to say, yeah, I said that, or not. She's speaking for someone else, so we don't know what he said. We don't really know what he said. And Pillsbury's actually an expert on China. He's not an expert on immigration. Just leaving that there. And there has been a sharp increase in migrants from China, but globally immigration has shifted dramatically in the past few years. So according to the Department of Homeland Security, before the pandemic, 90% of migrants crossing the border illegally came from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Since the pandemic, half of all migrants illegally crossing the border came from other countries. More people from Africa, Eastern Europe, and parts of Asia are traveling thousands of miles to try to immigrate to the United States. It's also not just happening in the U.S. Most European countries are also dealing with an increase in illegal migration. There's no evidence that migrants illegally entering the U.S. from China are part of a secret army that will somehow unite inside our country. Even if that was the plan, about 24,050 migrants from China crossed the southern border without papers last year, which is a sharp increase. That is true. But the United States military has 1.3 million active duty soldiers last year and slightly less than 800,000 reserve troops scattered in every state in the country. I'm not sure how Chinese migrants would form a type of military force that could challenge the U.S. military given those numbers. They could probably purchase firearms, of course, but how would they smuggle a tank or heavy artillery across the border? How would the secret army obtain cargo planes, armored vehicles, warships, submarines, helicopters, fighter jets, and aircraft carriers? Campos Duffy didn't frame Chinese migrants as rogue terrorists as much as she called them a secret army. Armies, even secret ones that exist in the minds of deranged narcissistic former presidents and Fox News hosts, need lots of equipment, weaponry, and resources to exist. Okay. It's also odd to sort of compare them to terrorists who are motivated in a very different way than somebody living under communism. It's just, I can't even wrap my head around that. Most of the people who are fleeing, apparently, China right now are doing so because of the zero tolerance COVID-19 policies that the government had in China that were just the breaking point. Because if you've seen any of the clips from people like screaming in buildings because they can't go out and the horrible things that happened during COVID-19 in that country, I could see why people are trying to get out. So anyway, next up we have those darn Marxist feminists. And again, this is from Monday, actually, last week. Ansley Einhart invited Rachel Campos Duffy on to discuss the controversy surrounding Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker's commencement speech at a Catholic university. Now, even the story is now 2 weeks old, the folks at Fox still thought it was newsworthy. Because, why not? Let's keep talking about that. Campos Duffy made a few wild assumptions about the origins of the feminist movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very countercultural message. I mean, and believe me, the backlash that he's getting, Ainsley, is also a very anti-Christian. It's a lot of anti-Christian bigotry. What he's saying is very counter to what the feminists, the neo-Marxists have been saying, which is that, family, tradition, children, all of these things don't matter, and that, you should focus on yourself. And what he put forward is a very different message. I look at myself. I have 2 degrees. I have a job. Right now, I was an at-home mom for 14 years. I can tell you my graduation day, like, totally pales in comparison to the significance of the day I met Sean, which is the greatest event of my life because it set the path for everything else. My marriage, the day I got married, the day each of my kids were born. And so when you have that kind of perspective, and that's the perspective he's bringing forward, for some reason, the feminists, which again is a branch of this neo-Marxist idea of reordering things, feel very threatened by it. And
Okay, although she's not coming right out and saying it, she's referencing a conspiracy theory that I have complained about multiple times on this podcast that I absolutely cannot stand. I think it's one of the dumbest things that people believe, and that would be cultural Marxism. It's an absolutely ridiculous and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory popular in right-wing circles. I don't have the time or space to completely unpack the stupidity that is cultural Marxism, but it boils down to the idea that a handful of Marxist professors decided that the United States was too family-oriented and Christian to embrace communism. According to the myth of cultural Marxism, these same professors manipulated young, idealistic students to spread their gospel of sorts into every institution in the country to remake America. In some versions of the theory, anti-Semitism is at its core, as the Jewishness of the professors are part of why they're seen as so caustic and destructive. Feminism, they don't mention that on Fox, by the way. They openly promote this ridiculous theory. Ted Cruz has a book with cultural Marxism in the title. Pete Hegseth wrote a book about education that is basically cultural Marxism. And yet, at the same time, Fox tries to act like they are super pro-Jewish and pro-Israel, and yet they promote this nonsense, which anybody who knows anything about conspiracy theories knows that is incredibly anti-Semitic. There's some versions that I've heard different versions of the theory. It's not just one. So don't get me started if you say, oh, but it's this or it's that. Well, yeah, there's more than one version of it, like a lot of conspiracy theories. The core is basically the same, but in some versions there's more professors than in others, and like it gets, I don't want to get into the stupidity of it, but there's different variations on it. I've read different variations on it, and some people who write about it will emphasize different things than others will. Any conspiracy theory you're going to find variations on. It's just how this nonsense works. And I say nonsense because it's nonsense. It's garbage. So feminism is only one aspect of it. And it's supposed to be like, oh, we tell women to become empowered, and then they're less likely to have children, and they won't focus on their family, and then they'll be more likely to, instead of like going to church and praying to God, they'll view the state as their center of the universe, and the state will become their life, and therefore they'll embrace socialism. Now, I will say this, and there's a bunch of very specific words used in cultural Marxism, like the long march into the institutions, which is supposed to take a very long time. Well, it obviously has, because it's been, depending again on which theory, which version of the theory, it's been nearly 100 years, or nearly, some people take it back to the 60s, some people go all the way back to the 30s on this one. So it's been decades, we'll just say that. And I would say it's fair to say that the United States is more capitalistic than ever. So just some basics. About over half of Americans own at least one share of stock. Over half of American families own property. And the United States is home to 33 million small businesses. That's a lot of a free market. Now, capitalism has flaws, and capitalism has shortcomings, and our economy favors big mega corporations over small mom and pop companies. You know, like I own a little store, yada, yada, yada. I have to compete with Amazon, that sort of thing. There's all kinds of nefarious things that go on. There's income inequality. There's exploitation of workers, all sorts of shortcomings with a free market system. But we are very much a free market system. And you could say, well, you know, too much regulation. If you're like a libertarian, you're screaming at your computer right now because they think, you know, we have way too much regulation. I would say it's a constant balance of taming the beast of capitalism, but whatever. We are still incredibly capitalist. Even our health insurance system, which is unique to the United States, most countries have a much better system, in my humble opinion, is still very, very much based in a free market, for profit, I would add, system. I think we need a better system, but whatever. I don't want to waste too much time on that. But yes, if it's a long march, it's been very, very, very slow and inefficient. What really happened is this, and I've talked about this before in various things. We had the Industrial Revolution. We moved off the farms. When we moved off the farms, the nature of work changed. Right around a couple decades later, we got hit with a nasty world war. And in Europe, they lost millions of men. So women kind of had to work. So that was the first wave of women starting to work. And the nature of work changed. You could work in a factory. You didn't necessarily have to have brute strength. You didn't have to pull a plow through soil. You could work in a factory. And so women start working in factories. Women start working. That's part of it. Then after World War I, there was World War II, and that's when Americans started working. American women started working at higher rates as well. Now, American women also started working before that, but that's when you saw spikes. And that fundamentally changed the workforce, and also changes in technology meant that we could live further away from our family members. All of this stuff, the nuclear family became dominant, yada, yada, yada. We could just go on and on and on. Before the Industrial Revolution, we used to live in larger extended families. We were closer to our cousins or aunts or uncles or grandparents. Everybody was much more intermeshed in our lives. The dawn of the Industrial Revolution, everything changed dramatically. And I'll say this as well. This idea that half of your adult population would be dependent on the other half is nutty. Because I think anybody listening to this podcast right now probably has relatives in your past, maybe present, where a woman is simply trapped in a terrible marriage. This happened in my family. I had more than one great-grandmother who was in a situation with an abusive husband, who was not a provider, who had untreated alcoholism, the whole 9 yards, could not get out. I had a male relative of mine who also got screwed over horribly by his wife. She just flat out abandoned him. So these things happen. This idea that we put everything on marriage and you have no other options other to stay in a happy marriage and take care of children, I think is a little crazy. There's nothing wrong with it. If people want to do that, of course, go for it. Do it. But to say that that's the only option or the only way for every single adult person in this country is madness. Absolute madness. Also, some people just can't have children or they don't want children. Why are we pressuring people who do not want to have kids to have kids? It's a terrible idea. So, I'm coming down from this. I also want to point out that Rachel Campos Duffy has an incredibly demanding job, as does her husband. Working in television, especially in the news industry, is not exactly chill. If they need you, you're going to have to come in, right? She's sort of like the sub for all these other people. So I'm sure when she probably has a lot of last minute, you got to show up at the studio to do this or that. And she has 9 children and her husband works. So obviously somebody probably, I don't know, but I'm guessing, pays for some help to help raise her children and help keep her house organized and tidy in the whole 9 yards. So just that being said, Rachel Campos Duffy, ladies and gentlemen, Rachel Campos Duffy. So before I move on to the next one, which is just a blatant lie, we're moving on from conspiracy theories to blatant lies. I should give a shout out to my sponsor. And who is that sponsor, you may ask? That are the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my Substack. I am 100% funded through crowdfunding. That means I have no large donor. I have no large sponsor. I have no advertisers. Nobody's pulling my strings. Nobody is telling me what to write about or what not to write about or what to suppress or push forward. I can do what I want and what I think is the most important news, what's the most important things to give to you. And this week is a great example. I'm doing back-to-back podcasts because I knew that there was no way I could cram all of this into the same episode. The last one just took up too much space. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber, you can go to my Substack at Decoding Fox News. Subscriptions start at $5 a month, or you can pay for the full year at $55. You can also go to my Patreon and become a paid supporter that way. Paid supporters, paid subscribers all get exclusive content. This week it was the written version of the podcast, which had hyperlink after hyperlink after hyperlink in it, and photos and all kinds of fun stuff. So, and if you can't afford that, just share the podcast, share the newsletter, tell your friends, give me a good review. That always helps as well. So in our next clip, this is from the Trump rally, which again took up everything in the Bronx. This is from Saturday, so the rally's already happened, but they're still talking about it on Fox because they acted like this was the greatest thing that's ever happened. Whatever. They lied about everything. They brought on Representative Carlos Gimenez from Florida. He's a Republican. And this is supposed to be, I'm going to break this down a little bit, and he's talking about Donald J. Trump with Will Cain.
What do you think is the appeal of Donald Trump?
Because he just tells the truth. You know, he's not the normal politician. He tells it like it is.
So that's just the first portion there, but I want to break that down because I discussed this on Twitter as well. Bill Maher, in an interview with the PBS NewsHour, which there was nothing wrong with the interview. It was a perfectly well-made interview. The folks at PBS do an incredibly great job with interviews, just across the board. And it wasn't supposed to be a hostile interview. He's trying to promote a book. He said something to Bill Maher's a very smug, arrogant man. And he said, why do you, it was something about the question of, Jeff Bennett asked him, like, well, why don't people, you ruffle feathers, basically. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what he said to him. But he said something to that extent. And Bill Maher answered, well, it's because I tell the truth. And in real time while watching this, I yelled at my computer. I said, no, you express your opinion. So somebody very, very arrogant who thinks that they are just amazing thinks that when they give their opinion, they're speaking the truth. No, a truth is the population of New York is 8.3 million. Opinion is New York City is the greatest city in the world. This shouldn't be that difficult to figure out, but a lot of people struggle with the difference between fact and opinion. And they think if they just say it loudly enough and say it with enough conviction, that is the truth, and that is not the truth. And to say that Donald J. Trump speaks the truth is laughable. As Donald J. Trump, this was done by the Washington Post, tallied a total of 30,573 times Trump lied during his presidency. On a given rally, he lies at least a few dozen times. It's just lie after lie after lie. I'm still working on my fact check. I got completely screwed up with his rally last week. It put me behind schedule on a number of things. But what he does is he not only lies, but he also exaggerates, and then he'll pile a lie on top of an exaggeration. And in just a couple sentences, sometimes I'll have to unpack like 3 or 4 false things that he said because he just layers them. And he just says it with enough conviction. He's like, I don't care. So that's what he means by speaking the truth. Now, here's the rest, which I will debunk.
And every once in a while, he may insult somebody, and that's the way it is. And people just like that honesty of Donald Trump. They also like his policies. Look, when he was president, Hispanics and African Americans had, the highest employment rates in history.
No, I will say that he does phrase that a little confusingly, because most people, when they speak about unemployment or employment, they'll talk about unemployment rates. They'll say the unemployment rate is 3% or 4%, right? They don't say the employment rate is. And what he said is that Latinos and blacks have had the highest employment rates, which is an odd way of putting it. So I knew that was false, and I looked it up. And I went to Fred. Again, hyperlinks in the newsletter, the written version of the podcast. And Fred is, if you're not familiar, the Federal Reserve Economic Data. That's what Fred stands for. It's the gold standard. They get their stuff from the Department of Labor. It's all interconnected. This is a primary source. If you want to find out the price of anything right now, like the average across the country, check Fred. When I was in grad school, I had to check something about stainless steel, which there's lots of different types of stainless steel because it's a manufactured product. It's not like copper, where there's one kind of copper, because copper is a metal. It's an element on the periodic table. Steel, because it's manufactured, it's like all these variations. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. I'm digressing, but here we go. So I looked up Fred, Federal Reserve Economic Data. The lowest Hispanic unemployment got during the Trump administration was 3.9%. Under the Biden administration, the lowest it's gotten has been 3.9%. So they are tied on that one. It actually dipped to 3.8% under Biden, but then was adjusted back up because that happens. So just slightly off. So according to Fred, the unemployment numbers for Black Americans have been much better under Joe Biden than they were under Trump. Under Trump, the lowest Black unemployment dipped was 5.3%. And under Biden, it got as low as 4.8%. So Biden has clearly beaten Trump on that. But Trump continues to lie about this. In pretty much every rally, he brags about it, and he is not telling the truth. And I will say, I can't say that this congressman was lying because I can't read his mind, and I like to avoid calling people liars. I will call Trump a liar because I know he's a liar. He lies all the time. He might just be uninformed, but the information is out there, and it's easy to find. Look it up. So next up, this one's subtle, but this is my new favorite Fox correspondent, Eric Shawn. Eric Shawn is a legitimate journalist with Fox News, and this is him talking about Trump's hush money trial.
And there was a dramatic moment in court as Robert Costello testified. At one point, he was muttering under his breath, saying, "This is ridiculous." He was rolling his eyes. Well, that really ticked off the judge. Judge Juan Merchan ordered everybody out of the courtroom. They completely cleared the courtroom, even turning the cameras off. You can only presume that he read Robert Costello the Riot Act, telling him to behave. Costello back on the stand this morning for more testimony. Back to you.
So again, that is subtle because it seems like, well, if you watched other media, that may not be that exceptional to you. If you watched MSNBC, CNN, ABC, whatever, BBC, if you watched another form of media, you just shrug your shoulders at that one. But for Fox, that was breathtaking because he basically kind of said, you read him the Riot Act, and he said it very straight. And Fox News, believe it or not, most legal analysts who were, at the trial, who watched the Costello testimony, had said it was very bad for Trump and that he was kind of a disaster as a witness. And then the judge basically had to clear the courtroom, chew him out because he was being disrespectful and obnoxious. Most legal analysts were saying that that was a bad move by the defense to bring on Costello to testify. Costello is also Rudy Giuliani's former attorney, and he was the man who was given the hard drive that contained the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. No kidding. So if you read anything but Fox, the Costello testimony was bad. Then on Fox, everybody was like, he was the best witness they've had. And then they were also like, the other thing they kept bragging about is, how dare that judge admonish him? And just went off on the judge as if the judge had done like this horrible, horrible thing. That happens all the time in court. My sister is a criminal defense attorney. And yeah, judges will snap at you, tell you to shut up, kick you out of the court, all kinds of stuff. They don't play. So next up, we have, this was a glorious, glorious moment. And then I have a bonus. I think we have time for the bonus. This one was a guest turned the tables on Jesse Watters primetime. This has happened before. And I currently have a video that has been viewed like 20,000 times on YouTube by a former gang member who appeared on Jesse Watters. And Jesse Watters expected him to be kind of this rough and tumble gang member and to be all like, yeah, I killed people or whatever. I don't know what he was expecting, but he kept asking him all these leading questions. And instead, he got a very calm, incredibly well-spoken man who came across as being an advocate for immigrants and other Latinos. And the man's name was Spanky Loco, and he had tattoos all over his face. But it was a great example of not judging a book by its character. And Jesse Watters just fell on his face. And I clipped that and stuck it on YouTube. And I believe Spanky Loco is the person who is promoting it, which he should, because it's a great clip. And he does a great job in it because he's so calm. He just handles him so, so well. And this is a different example because what Jesse Watters tries to do is he tries to have like eccentric lefties on his show, like liberals, progressives, whatever, eccentric people in general. And then he just likes to make fun of them. Like, oh, look at the crazy, liberal. And sometimes it's people who think they're vampires or think they're wolves. Or one of my favorite Jesse Watters examples was a woman who he claimed identified as a mermaid. He had her on. She had her whole outfit on. First thing out of her mouth is, I don't actually think I'm a mermaid. This is just like a character. It's like a costume I wear. And that kind of ruined the whole segment, didn't it? This one was a woman named Mia Magic. And she runs these like seminars where she takes women out into the woods and they kind of let their rage free. They yell, they take sticks, they beat the ground with it. It looked kind of silly, but who cares? It's not they're not hurting anybody. They're literally not hurting anybody. And it seemed fine to me. Just kind of eccentric and weird. Definitely, I've seen these kind of male retreats where they're screaming and, they treat men like boot camp, like they're at boot camp, like they're in the military, and they get in their ear and they scream at them and basically torture them. This did not look like that. This looked like people just kind of letting it all out in the woods. So pretty harmless. So he has this woman, and she's very attractive. She's very charismatic, very well-spoken. And I couldn't include the entire clip, but I'll describe it. So she gets on there, and she had read Jesse Watters' book. She referenced parts of it, and I was like, wow. And she was complimentary towards him and very pleasant. And he didn't seem to pick up on any of that. And he had planned to kind of make fun of her, and that's what he was going to do. So as he's interviewing her, there's a clip of women on one of her retreats just, yelling in the woods. And he starts, he's not even looking at her. He's not making eye contact with her. He's cutting her off. And the tables turn fairly quickly. Here it is.
You're saying a lot really fast, so we have to write this down. You said listening, holding.
Listening, yeah.
Nurturing, did I miss nurturing?
Bringing nature, going out into nature is really great because
take
nature
them into nature. Okay, listening to them, holding them, taking them on walks in the woods. Am I missing anything else?
Asking them what they need for support.
Asking them for support.
Asking them what they need for support.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is big advice.
And I think being vulnerable.
Oh, that's the deal
being
killer.
vulnerable. I think men. Oh, come on.
I'm teasing.
You got divorced, Jesse, right? I'm sure you had a couple of nights where you were sad and where you felt lonely.
Yes,
I think that everyone needs to feel comfortable to feel.
The most vulnerable man you'll ever meet. But we have to go. You're a good witch, and we love you, Johnny.
What was amazing about that exchange is you could see on her face how the battle was going to change, because she had this very pleasant, I'm here, I just want to be your friend, we're going to have this great conversation. And then as he got more and more condescending towards her and more dismissive, because he literally wasn't even looking at her. He was looking down at his notes going, yeah. He puts his hands up as if to say, shut up. Puts his hands up to the screen in a stop. He's with both hands, stop, towards her as she's talking. And you see this, look very brief, astonishment across her face. And then that starts to turn. And then she just goes in for this stab with the divorce comment. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, that was fun. And what was really fun about watching that is that it was obvious that she was incredibly prepared for anything he was going to throw at her. So she was sort of armed mentally and had all the tools that she needed, because she was very pleasant with him at first. She flattered him. She knew his book. She, you could see that she was trying so hard to make the best of the situation, try to promote her company. And then when she needed to, she on a dime went straight for his throat. And I was like, yes. Anyway, he's not bright. Anyway, so moving on. I couldn't fit this next one in the newsletter. I just didn't have the space for it. But it is the bonus for the podcast listeners. And this is another wild conspiracy that they were trying to promote on Fox and then suddenly didn't, because they would have looked completely ridiculous if they kept doing this. So here's the clip.
News alert, a major bombshell in the Trump documents case. The FBI authorized the use of deadly force during the Mar-a-Lago raid. This according to documents filed by Trump's legal team. Agents in unmarked polo shirts planned to bring standard issue weapons, ammo, handcuffs, medium and large size bolt cutters, and even lock picking equipment as they prepared to go door to door at Mar-a-Lago. And quote, Wow, I just came out of the Biden witch hunt trial in Manhattan, the icebox, and was shown reports that crooked Joe Biden's DOJ and their illegal and unconstitutional raid of Mar-a-Lago authorized the FBI to use deadly, lethal force. Now we know for sure that Joe Biden's a serious threat to democracy. He is mentally unfit to hold office. 25th Amendment. They're saying Trump's going to unleash assassination squads on his enemies. But Biden unleashed armed agents into Trump's house, authorized armed agents to use deadly force in the Mar-a-Lago raid. That is insane. Is there any justification for that?
Absolutely not. Now, why would they do that? I don't know. But, you know, my mind as a prosecutor goes to maybe they wanted the engagement of physical force. Maybe they wanted to come in without FBI, without, you know, DOJ, without all of that, identifying so that they could engage in deadly physical force. And let me ask, they didn't do it against Joe Biden when they seized his records.
So also from Fox, this came out the next day. News, FBI searches at President Biden's homes also included deadly force policy, which is standard. A person familiar with the Her investigation confirms that the standard Department of Justice policy statement regarding the use of deadly force is also included in the operations order for the searches at President Biden's residence in Delaware. This is from Jackie Heinrich. She's part of the legitimate news team at Fox News. So that actually got taken down off of TikTok, and I had to appeal to get them to put it back up because they claimed it was misinformation. And I said, that's because a computer basically searched the video. You need to have a human being watch it. And I said at the very end, I debunked the whole thing. The title, it's debunked. I said it was a reckless thing that they said. And of course, I don't have to debunk it. I just did in the video or the audio there. Jackie Heinrich basically said that's just standard for all FBI searches. So they did it to Biden too. It's not a big deal. Trump was running around saying they tried to kill him. You know, like, oh, they tried to assassinate me with the FBI. Oh, wait, I should do my Trump voice. This is my joke voice when I do Trump. Because he's basically just a whiny little whiny person who's always complaining about everything. They have a gag order. Okay, so yeah, that's my. So I went ahead. I don't really sure why I did this because I was kind of planning to cut them up and rearrange them. We'll see how the verdict goes. That'll kind of depend on what I do with this stuff. But I did record all. So far, there's been 20 of them statements that Trump has made after court. Yesterday, he didn't make one on the 21st day. He made a comment before court. So I have all 20 of them. I do all of them in an annoying voice, and they're all on YouTube and TikTok. So on YouTube, I'm Juliet Jeske, and on TikTok, I'm Decoding Fox News. So moving on to, if you want to check them out, some of them are quite long. Some of them are like 15 minutes long. It was murder to make them. So moving on to stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. Updates to the war in Ukraine. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said at a press conference that the U.S. is committed to keeping weapons moving to Ukraine. Austin and as many as 50 defense leaders from Europe and around the world met last Monday to coordinate more military aid to Ukraine. Climate disasters. NOAA, or the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, just released the highest hurricane season early forecast in the history of the agency. NOAA predicts 8 to 13 hurricanes and 17 to 25 named storms. Named storms have wind speeds of 39 miles per hour or higher. The warmth of the Atlantic Ocean mixed with the La Nina conditions combined have led to an 85% chance of above normal season along the Atlantic seaboard. PBS produced a segment about coastal areas in the UK that will likely wash away due to erosion caused by climate change. Residents in some areas are suing the government for failing to protect their homes. As many as 2,000 people might have been buried in a massive landslide in Papua New Guinea. The exact cause of the landslide is unknown, as they are often triggered by earthquakes, but the area has been hit by excessive rain, which could be a mitigating factor. The container ship that destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge made it back to port after debris and parts of the bridge were removed from its path. The ship and its crew have been stuck at the crash site for nearly 2 months. The High Court in the UK ruled that Julian Assange can bring a new appeal against his extradition to the United States, where he faces charges for leaking military secrets. The U.S. has argued that his work endangered the lives of military personnel and confidential sources. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made a formal apology to victims of a medical scandal that involved contaminated blood transfusions. About 30,000 people were infected and 3,000 have died, with more deaths to follow. Martin Grunberg, the chairman of the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, said he would resign after a scathing report found a systemic culture of harassment and a toxic work environment inside the agency. 11 people have been criminally indicted in a fake elector scheme in Arizona that was designed to try to keep Donald J. Trump in power after he lost the 2020 presidential election. 7 others were indicted for their broader involvement in post-election activities, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Boris Epstein, Christina Bobb, Jenna Ellis, and Michael Roman. The Department of Justice is suing Oklahoma over a law that would make it illegal for undocumented immigrants to live in the state. The new law could jail and fine immigrants who resided in the state without legal documentation. Major tech companies such as Amazon, Microsoft, and OpenAI met in South Korea last week to discuss the renewed commitment to the safety of new artificial intelligence technologies. Companies from the U.S., China, Canada, the UK, France, South Korea, and the United Arab Emirates agreed to make voluntary commitments to ensure the safe development of their most advanced AI models. 46 people were hospitalized, and a 73-year-old man died during a bout of severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. The turbulence occurred within seconds of a warning by the crew. The airline said it will implement new safety measures in the wake of the accident. Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, said that he wanted peace with China during his inaugural speech last week. China responded by sending dozens of warplanes and ships around the island in a series of military drills. The families of 19 of the victims of the school shooter at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, are suing 100 state police officers over their botched response to the mass shooter. The family said they also agreed to a $2 million settlement with the city. Another lawsuit filed by the families is directed at Meta, the parent company of Instagram, a gun manufacturer, and Activision, the publisher of the video game Call of Duty. The UK Prime Minister called for a general election to be held on July 4th, which is earlier than expected. Representative Jamie Raskin and Representative Sheldon Whitehouse are asking the Department of Justice to launch a sweeping investigation of big oil corporations. They allege that the companies have deceived the public for decades about their complicity in climate change and willingness to address it. Mahid Kalamaz, an American therapist being held hostage in Syria, has died in captivity after being detained for 7 years. He was captured when he went to visit family members. The Senate Budget and Finance Committees have launched a joint investigation into a claim that Donald J. Trump made a quid pro quo proposition to big oil executives, offering to roll back climate policies for $1 billion in campaign contributions. Chairman Sheldon Whitehouse and Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden are demanding answers from 9 oil and gas companies and their trade associations. A new Louisiana law designates abortion medication as a dangerous controlled substance. Possession of the drugs mifepristone and mifepristol without a prescription is now a crime punishable with possible fines and jail time. The WNBA has plans to expand to Canada. An expansion franchise in Toronto will begin play during the 2026 season. Increasing violence in the Myanmar civil war has caused thousands to flee into neighboring Thailand. The military junta that claimed power in 2021 has suffered a series of defeats to the exiled civilian government. Ivan Boesky, a Wall Street trader who inspired the fictional character Gordon Gekko in the film Wall Street, died at the age of 87. Lebowski spent time in prison for insider trading after living a lavish lifestyle in the 1980s. Morgan Spurlock, the filmmaker best known for the documentary Super Size Me, where he ate nothing but McDonald's for 30 days to study the effects of fast food on his body, died from cancer at the age of 53. Super Size Me was nominated for an Academy Award. Spurlock was also caught up in the Me Too movement after he came forward to detail his own history of sexual misconduct. He is survived by 2 sons. And those are all the stories. There's a lot of stories there. Moving on to By the Numbers, where I compare the top 5 topics on Fox News to the top 5 topics on the PBS NewsHour. We're going to start with Fox. 30% was just Trump 2024, basically hyping up Trump's rally, hyping up Trump in general. 9% was bashing Biden. 8% was Trump hush money trial. 3% was Democratic cities and states are hell. That's a category I made up because that kind of changes. They'll just pick a Democratic area and be like, oh, it's horrible there. And then border crisis was also 3%. For PBS, you had Artist Profile, which is a staple on the network. Moving on to Trump hush money trial, 5%. Ukraine war, 4%. ICC arrest, warrants for the leaders of Hamas and Israel. That's a huge story. Fox did talk about this, actually. On PBS, it was 4%. And then Iran president helicopter crash. So the president of Iran died in a helicopter crash, 4% on PBS. Fox did also talk about that. So words used on Fox for the week ending May 26, 2024. We're going to start with Trump at 618 times, Biden 395, the Bronx 257, Black, as in black voters, 163, crime 102, border 85, migrant 64, inflation 55, Latino or Hispanic was 50, Iran 46, economy 41, Israel 36, China 35, Hunter 32, AOC 23, and Ukraine only 10. So that's it for the podcast. If you'd like to see more of what I do with Decoding Fox News, you can see me and see my work on X, formerly known as Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I think I got them all. I may not have. I'm really, really tired right now. Back-to-back podcasts always mess me up. And if you want to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon. There's also a version of this podcast that you can find on the Resolute Square YouTube channel. And I'm going to try to make some more videos this week. I'm still working on my Trump debunking craziness that got pushed off is what happens. And I want to give a shout out to the podcast mascots. They send their love. They are Odin and Thor. They're both cats. I will see you in the next podcast. Thank you so much.
To my one woman show. It's nice to meet you. When we meet again, I'll never know.
Resolute Square.